बार का चुनाव राष्ट्रवाद के मुद्दे पर होगा या विकास?
शाहीन बाग के मुद्दे पे होगा। आज शाहीन बाग को जो प्रमोट कर रहा है वो अमौतुल्लाह खान कर रहा है। वो किस पार्टी का है? ठीक है जी, वो 5 लाख रुपए देता है जो दंगा करता है। उस फ्री के चक्कर में कश्मीर बन जाएगा दिल्ली। फिर जो दिल्ली में फ्री वाले बंदे हैं ना, वो 1991 की तरह है, कश्मीरी बंडरों की तरह भाग जाएंगे। कश्मीरी बंडर कहते हैं कि हमने बेवकूफी की, हमने लालच किया, जो हम कारोबार करते रहे, बिल्डिंग बनाते रहे, और वो कहते रहे कोई बात नहीं, हमारे लिए बना रहे हो, और एक ही रात में भगा दिया उन्होंने। कश्मीर हमारे सामने बहुत बड़ा उदाहरण है। अगर हम आज भी नहीं समझेंगे तो कब समझेंगे? 24% थे हम वहाँ पे पाकिस्तान में, 23% थे बांग्लादेश में, कितने रह गए आज? लेकिन ये हमारे को कहते हैं आज की एनआरसी आएगी सीए के बाद, हम कहते हैं कि जब आज आप 24 करोड़ हो और कल को अगर आज 50 करोड़ हो जाओगे तो हमारे के साथ आप कश्मीर जैसा नहीं करोगे क्या? अब हमारे को ये देश के प्रधानमंत्री से मांगते हैं जवाब, हम इनसे मांगते हैं। आज हमें अपना भविष्य, अपने बच्चों का भविष्य असुरक्षित दिख रहा है। काम तो चलते रहेंगे, कारोबार हम कर लेंगे, करते आए। ना मनमोहन सिंह ने हमारे को खिलाया, ना मोदी खिला रहा है। हम अपने बलबूते पे खा रहे हैं, काम कर रहे हैं, नौकरी कर रहे हैं, इसलिए कर रहे हैं। जब मनमोहन सिंह जी प्रधानमंत्री थे तब भी नौकरी कर रहे थे और आज भी नौकरी कर रहे हैं और स्वाभिमान से जी रहे हैं। और मोदी जी हमें स्वाभिमानी बना के जीना चाहते हैं। केजरीवाल जी हमें मुफ्त गोरी कराना सिखाना चाहता है।
जो राष्ट्रवाद का चल रहा है दिल्ली में, ये बहुत अच्छी बात है और राष्ट्रवाद पे ही वोट होगा।
राष्ट्रवाद पे इस बार वोटिंग होगी।
पूरी तरह से दिल्ली राष्ट्रवाद पे वोट करेगी और जागरूक जनता दिल्ली की राष्ट्रवाद पे ही बात करेगी। अब
फ्री पानी फ्री नहीं चाहिए
भैया, ये दिल्ली कंगलों की थोड़ी है, दिल्ली तो दिल वालों की है। यहाँ पे तो जबरदस्ती बिजली पानी फ्री दे रहे हो। बिजली फ्री पानी जिसको चाहिए था उसको मिल गया, बाकी जनता को बेवकूफ बना रहे हो यार। किसी एक से लेके दूसरे को दे रहे हो, क्या मतलब है? शाहीन बाग जो है ये दिल्ली में केजरीवाल की उपज है और आज उस पर भारी पड़ रही है, तो वो पोलराइज के मैटर दे रहे हैं।
ये नहीं लगता आपको इस बार दिल्ली का चुनाव हिंदू मुसलमान हो गया है?
क्यों नहीं है? जब आप मुसलमानों की बात करेंगे तो हिंदू चूतिया थोड़ी है, हिंदू भी अपनी बात करेगा।
Hey Atul, good morning. Amit this side.
Hi Amit, very good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing good. I'm doing good, Amit. Thank you for joining in. Amit, done with your voting?
Yes. So, no, actually, Atul, I'm from Kanpur, so not eligible for voting here in Delhi.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
No problem.
All right.
So,
Yeah, wait for a second. Let's see.
So I'll be joining from two systems. So once I'll be sharing my presentation from there, and Other I'll be doing the hands-on in my other system.
Okay, fine.
Another one thing I'd like to know is, can I post this recording in my YouTube channel as well?
Your YouTube, right?
Yeah.
I don't mind. Yes.
Okay. Sure. So, would you able to share the recording after the call?
Yes. Yes. We record all our sessions, and I will.
So, because that will be best for me to use one system.
For sure. So, Amit, what we've seen is we've seen people join in, at least 10 minutes late. Usually. So,
No problem at all. I'll be waiting.
so on our user community, we have got around 30 people who have RSVP'd. So I'm hoping at least 15 to 20 people of them should be joining. Right? So Amit, let's start with the webinar, and more people will join in soon.
Yeah. Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud.
Okay. So should I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Welcome everyone in this Impact Salesforce Saturday, and thanks Atul for inviting me. Our main agenda for this session will be how we can do the error handling in a Mulesoft level. As we know that in all the tools we are working, either it might be Salesforce, Mulesoft, Delboomi, or any other tools, error handling is the main focus area where a developer should focus on. And about me a little bit, my name is Amit Singh. I'm an application architect, and these are my social media handles. You can follow me here. And the first session that we did using Impact Salesforce Saturday was in February 2016. And thanks for the new Delhi group leaders Atul and Nitin, who started this nice initiative where we are helping many Salesforce people or who are, wanted to make their career in Salesforce. So today's agenda is we are going to discuss Mule event, and then we will see how we can conditionally route our request based on some input parameters from the user. And once we are done with these two topics, then we will actually jumping into the error handling part. And why we are covering these two, because these two are going to play the most important role in any Mule application whatever we are developing. So in initial 5 or 10 minutes it might look like not interesting for you, but once we are doing the practical implementation, trust me, it will be a very understanding and calculative logic whatever we are going to put here. So Mule event is the key structure, or we can say that whatever the data that we are passing in our Mule flow from the different flow, that is actually passed with the help of Mule event. And Mule event is combination of attributes and payload, and then we can also create variables. So if you see that whatever the data that we wanted to pass, let's say that for example, I'm fetching some data from a Salesforce, and then I'm sending that data to some third party in SQL database or Oracle database. Whatever data I'll be getting from Salesforce will be inside a Mule event, and inside Mule event I can get payload, the actual data that we wanted to send to the third party system, and the attributes that we can get, like what are the headers, what was the request response parameters, what are the input properties and output properties, all we will get here inside attributes. And apart from that, if these are not enough for our request, sometime we wanted to store some attributes or some record IDs, some variables for our convenience coming flow in the upcoming flows, like a Mule application can have multiple flows. We can use variables unlike other programming languages we do, and these variables are very helpful that we can access across the complete application between the different flows. And as Mule events are immutable, we cannot change those Mule events. So whatever the input will be the first processor, that will become the whatever the output will be the first processor, that will become the input for the second processor. So here if you see in this diagram, this is our event source and these are event processors. So if we talk about the output of first event processor, it is going to be the input of the second processor, and then the output of this processor is going to the input of next event connector. So this is how the Mule events works. Now let's see how Mule event structure actually look like, and then we will work on choice routing. So for this we are actually using Anypoint Studio 7.4, and to create a new project you can have multiple ways, like if you want to create from the file, you can create select Mule project, and from there you just need to give the name. I'm just going to say at ImpactSalesforce Saturday, and it will create a project for you. It will load some dependencies. At it backend, it supports the main dependencies, so it will be loading some jar files for you, some libraries, and whatever the dependency it requires to run your Mule application in the local system, as well as after deployment in the cloud environment. So this is a canvas panel where you can drag and drop your palette or your elements from the right hand side. So if you are already aware, that is well and good. And if you're not, the first step that we need to do is we need to tell a Mule application that this is your endpoint where you actually need to listen. So for that, we can drag and drop listener. We have some other options, like if you wanted to listen some database, we wanted to listen some web services, we can use multiple connections that are available here, and inside add modules, or you can search some modules. For example, if you wanted to search for Salesforce, or if you wanted to search for Workday connector, SAP connector, all connectors are available in the Mulesoft exchange. Now we have drag and drop our listener. You can see it is not happy and we are getting some red sign over here. Why we are getting some error? Because it is saying that there is no configuration, there is no HTTP listener defined whom I should listen. So to define a connector configuration, just click on this plus green sign, and it will automatically populate with the default port. If you try to test connection, either it will tell us our port is being used by some other process, or it will say that connection is successful. So our port is already used by another process, so I'm going to use 9000, and you can see that connection is successful. Now once we have created this configuration, still our listener is saying that there is one more thing that is required path. It said that you told me that this is my configuration, but what is the exact path? What is the exact location where I should listen? So let's say that here we are going to say here demo. So now once if you click in the canvas, it will automatically grayed out the error and we will not get that error. After that, transform message, we will talk more about this. Just to show you how Mule event works. So this is actually a Mule event. You see that we have payload, whatever the data we will be getting from the input listener. We have some variables. If we, as we don't have any variable here, we are not getting any variables. And then we have attributes. We have listener path. We have whatever the version we are listening, what method we are actually calling. So these are the different attributes that we can access, and for passing the parameters or accessing the parameters, we also do have query params or UI parameters. So this is how actually Mule event look like, and we are going to play more around while we will be working with error handling. And then next thing that we need to work is conditional routing of event. So if you see that in this picture, even I put we have three different events. We are querying accounts, we are querying contact, and by default we are querying Salesforce leads. So it is a more like if statement in Salesforce or Java. If we do compare, it is saying that if variable, whatever the variable we created, object type, if it is account, go to the Salesforce instance, query the few information of my accounts, and then give it back to listener, and listener will give us the output in the any Postman, web service testing tool. Either it might be Postman, Advanced REST Client, or if you have deployed into the Cloud Hub, it might be Cloud Hub URL as well. So why this conditional routing of event is required? So for example, as we said that it more like if and else. If you wanted to get only one condition, based on the condition we wanted to get the results. Suppose that let's say that we know there is a data A who is coming, and this should go to system X. The data B is coming, it should go to system Y. That is like we should go for the routing. But the only drawback for the routing is we should be knowing the exact number of systems where we need to send the data, and the possibilities what data a user can give us, so that based on those possibilities we can send the data to the system. And if in future there are changes, like if we don't want, we need to configure our API, or if we wanted to add more systems, we again need to modify our system. So this is how. So now let's quickly see how we can do that. And again, we are going to implement the same example here. So as of now, we are just done with the listener part. And there is one thing that I'd like to tell you. Once you will select listener or any process here, once you will be selecting here, go to the advanced section, and you can see here allowed method. We can provide which method is allowed for that URL. So if we say that only get method, we will only be access this URL, and the URL that is localhost 9000 and demo. That is only accessible with the with get method. If you try to use other methods like post, put, or delete, we will get some error that endpoint is not defined. Now we talked about variables. So how we are going to create a variables in Mulesoft. For that we have a element that is set variable, and that is defined in the core elements of Mulesoft. You just need to drag and drop. Display name, I'm going to say that set variable o type. And why I'm doing this, so that I can easily understand that this is a variable where I'm going to set my object type. And for the name, this is the name of variable that we are going to access, and what will be the value. Either you can define some value by yourself. For example, you can actually put account here, or you can use some functions here like what actually we wanted to. So we have event, and then we need to use data view. It will be message, and under message we need to go to the attributes, and under attributes if you notice that we have query params, and under that we can say that, let's say that this is the query parameters that we are going to send while we are making our request to the URL. And if we are not setting a parameter, by default we can also say, if there is nothing in this parameter, by default let's say that lead, and then save it. Now we have created a parameter. Let's put a choice router here. For that you again need to find out the choice router under favorites section, drag and drop, and you will see that it is automatically giving you one condition and a default condition. In the when, if you select here when, again you will see an expression, and for the expression we are going to use a function. And here what we actually wanted to do is, we need to check our variable. If our variable is equal to account, access the account, query go to Salesforce and query accounts. If our variable is opportunity, go to Salesforce and query opportunity, and for default we are going to query lead, because we are giving default value as a lead. To access the variable, what we need to do is, we need to type wheres, and then once you will type a dot notation here, it will automatically give you the all list of the available variables that are available to you. And select here, and we will say that equal to account here. And if you see here again, now we are getting green signal that we are not getting into any kind of problem. And for default, let's quickly add one more. And how we will be adding one more conditions here. So I'll be telling, let's say that we wanted to query as per our requirement. So find Salesforce query, drag and drop here. You will see that we have a Salesforce query. Now forget about the configuration, we will do it later. Let's do again find the query here. And you just need to drag and drop. If you see that we are dragging and drop between this choice router and the conditions. If you drag and drop here, it will automatically create a when condition for you. That means it will create else if condition for you. And here you can provide your condition for the expression. And again, for the variables, we are going to say, instead of opportunity, let's work on contacts. Now we need to do a configuration. We need to provide which Salesforce environment you need to query. So here I'm just going to change the name of my display, whatever, so that I can easily understand. Again, we need to click on this green plus icon. And here you will see multiple methods of authentication, whatever method you wanted to. These 4 are deprecated and these 5 are working currently. So we are going to use username and password here. Just provide username and password. And this security token is available, like if you have not set your IP address at your profile level or network access level, you need to provide the security token as well. And from where you will get security token, let me walk you through before we go ahead here. As I've already set IP address, I'll not be able to see that option here, but I'll walk you through and tell you where you can see. You just need to click on your name, go to my settings, and under personal section, you just need to click here. It will expand, and in these options, you will get an option called Reset My Security Token. And once you will click on that option, it will tell you that the security token is going to send on the registered email with this account. Why I'm not getting this option? Because I have already added IP address at both at profile level and network access level. So if you wanted to see, again, I can show you in profile level IP address as well. So this is my user. Okay, I need to go to detail page. So if you see here in our system admin file, there is a login IP range, and I have a many number of IP ranges added in my system. And out of them, there is one IP, which is universal IP address, and I can log in anywhere in the world where I am, and if the net is accessible. So like this, you can reset your security token, and to test your connection, you just need to click on test connection. And please don't make any changes in this URL if you are trying to put 47, and this Mulesoft is not allowed to use 47 as of now. So if you will try to use it, will give you some error and you might be getting confused. You can see our test connection is successful. You just need to click OK, and now we have got the configuration here. For the query, let's quickly type here select ID name from accounts. And we are going to limit 10 records here. So now we will be getting some records for the accounts. Let's do the same for contacts here. And if you notice that on the right side, it is immediately refreshing the metadata. So this is with the help of DataSense Explorer. Whatever the value or whatever the query we are here providing here, we will be getting the output here. Like if you see, let me show you this as well. If you see that we have a payload, and it doesn't know what kind of payload we are getting from the system. We have some attributes, and all the request attribute we are going to get here. And inside the variables, if you see, now we have variables O type, that is object type, and what is the type of that variable is string. So all those you will be getting here in the input. And if you go to the output, again for the output we are getting array of objects, and these are the fields that we are going to get from the system. And attributes, we'll be again getting the attributes and the variables as well. So DataSense Explorer is also going to help you in terms of while you're working with the Mulesoft. And again, let's try to do for the default as well. And here we are going to query lead. Now we are done. After that, what we need to do is let's quickly clear this, and from the favorite section, find out this transform message. Why this transform message is useful? Whenever we wanted to do a transformation from the different formats to different formats, because Mulesoft is basically used for the integration purpose, and the motto, we can say that the logic behind integration is transform data from one format, either JSON or XML, to the another format. This transform message is going to do this for you. You don't need to worry about the transformation, or you don't need to use any kind of code that we are doing in Salesforce. We're getting some errors here. What is the error? Okay, there is no error. Now, if you see that we have found some issue, could not resolve metadata. Okay, that is not a problem. This might be because of tooling API. Now, if you see that in the transform message, it is still refreshing the metadata. This is why we are not getting anything for the left hand side. Now we have got payload is array of object, and then output is application by Java. I just wanted to use application JSON, and for the output I'm just going to say payload, because in the payload I'm going to get the data. So if you see here, if I have typed pay, and if you hit control space, it will going to get everything here, whatever the payload you have. And if you wanted to map your variables, you can also map by dragging and dropping. And the same thing we are going to do for contacts and lead. Again, we are going to use JSON format so that we can get the output in form of JSON. So now we have developed our application. If you see that we have a choice router, we have a variable, and we have three query elements that are doing a query from to our Salesforce environment. Now let's quickly run this project into our local. So if you right click here, you'll get run project, and we have another object debugging. So debugging is useful whenever you are trying to debug a problem in your in your Mule application like Salesforce. You put system.debug. So this is a debugger here in Mulesoft. And once you will run this, it will do all the things for you, like it will get all the dependencies that is required for Salesforce jar files. All it will download from the Mule exchange, and all the Maven dependencies it will be downloading, and it will be creating a jar file, executing that jar file into your local system, and you can access that jar file and access your URL from any web service testing client. And for this demo, I'm using advanced REST client, and you can also use Postman or DHC. There are many other tools available, and it will also give you the complete log, like this is our application which they are trying to initialize. And after that, once this application is started, you will get, and the application is deployed and started, either it is a success or there any kind of error. You will get every information here. So you can see here our application is deployed, and the status is also deployed. If you get here failed, that means your application is failed to deploy, and you need to look into the errors. Whatever the error, it will give you above this in the console as well, and it will also give you the error in your XML file, that is configuration XML. I'll walk you through this XML file if the time allows us after error handling. So now let's go to our advanced REST client and try to hit. We were using localhost, and that was 9000, and it was demo. If you hit enter and let's wait, and you can see we are not passing any parameters. Still we are getting, let's say that source view, we are getting leads. Why we are getting lead? Let me again show you in the application. In the variables, we said that this is a default lead. If you are not sending anything, it is going to return us lead by default. And if you try to send some parameter, let's say that we are trying to send object type, and we are going to say here account. And if I will send it, I'm getting some error here, invalid request data. And we will also getting the error here in our application as well. That means there is a error in our query. There was a typo mistake in our object. That is what we are getting the error. So you don't need to worry about that. We don't need to deploy the project again. Once you will save it, it will do a quick deploy for us, like quick save in Salesforce. It will be doing a quick deploy, and that our application will be up in a very few seconds. You can see our application is up. Again, if we go back, try to send this. This time we are getting 200 code. That means successfully we are getting the accounts, and we're getting the records here as well, and the 10 records, whatever we are getting. So this was about how a choice router work, and how we will be using this later on in our error handling. So let's now move to the error handling. By default in Mulesoft or in any system, if you have not defined any error handling mechanism, it is going to use a default error handling that is provided by their system. It might be Mulesoft, Dell Boomi, Salesforce, any Java application or .NET application. Unlike the other application, Mulesoft also has a default error handling where They say that globally they handle the error in the Mule application, throw the error in the log, and we cannot configure, or if you wanted to make changes as per our, like if you wanted to tell the user if the error is kind of this, return this error, that we cannot do here in the global handling. That what we saw in the earlier request while we were trying to send the request to the account parameter, there was a typo mistake and we were getting the errors. That is what global error handling is actually. And we're not going to see this because we already saw. And before we go ahead, each error has its parent. Like in Salesforce, we have each exception has its parents. In Mulesoft, we have each error has its parents. If we talk about unauthorized, it has a parent of client security, and client security has a parent of Mule security. And every parent, there is a any, that is a in Salesforce, if we say that, or in other languages, we say that exception is a parent class. Here in Mulesoft, any is a parent class of all the errors. If you define any in your error handling condition, it is going to handle any kind of error that is occurring because of your Mule flow or your any process that you have defined in your Mule flow. And this is what this is for the validation. Like if you're trying to validate some string, either it is a number or a boolean or integer, decimal, or what kind of a string it is. And this is how it look like. And the same way we are going to get the errors if we will define. By default, what it does, if there is a success response that we saw, it will return 200 for us. And whatever the payload that is, either it might be some error payload or it might be a success payload that we also saw here. If we go back again, you can see by default we are getting 200. And if we try to find out, we will see by default the error that we will get is 500, the error code 500, and the output that we will get is error description. We will not be able to find out what type of output or type of error is, either it is HTTP, what is the namespace, we will not be able to find. If we try to find, we have to configure, and for that we have error handling mechanism in Mulesoft. And all these two values can be overridden for any HTTP listener, and we will see how we can override that in our case as well. Next thing is, in Mule error handler, we have three labels where we can handle error, either globally, like we can define a complete separate configuration file, and we can provide error handling mechanism there, and that will work for the complete entire application for that project. And second one is we can use application label, and third one is we can use process label. It is like we can do try catch, or we can use database.update if we compare as a Salesforce. So each error handler can have multiple more than one processor, a handler scope, that is on error continue and on error propagate. We are going to discuss in detail these two because these two are the key things for us in today's session. And each error scope, if I talk about continue or propagate, can have n number of scope processors that we saw here in our project. So if we talk about what scope processors are, these are scope processors. We can put any number of processors in our error handling, either it might be a global level, process level, or application level. So let's consider this scenario one. We have a calling flow that we saw here. We have this flow. This is our HTTP listener, which is requesting something, and this is a process, or we can say that here error occurred. There is no error handler defined. Whatever the processor we have put after that, after error is occurring, are not going to execute it, and error response is going to return. You will see this. This is the flow of our execution. Error will get thrown. Mulesoft error handler executed. Error gets thrown, and our response is going to return. You might be seeing there are two process where we are saying error gets thrown. How it is relevant? Let me explain you. The first is showing that for this error handler, whatever the error is throwing by our process. Second is the error handler that we are going to define here, might be global or application level. From there, they are going to throw what error actually need to display to the user or need to return to the user if they are consuming our API. And then it is going to return error response. So let's consider this scenario first. First thing that we need to do is As you can see that this is a configuration file, and if you see src main mule, and where we can provide a number of flows as per our requirement, because in real time there might be a complex requirement, and would not like to put all things in a single flow, or we don't want it to mess up our code, because that will not be a best practice as well. So for that, let's quickly create a new configuration file. Right click on src main flow, go to new, and there you need to select mule configuration file. And here I'm going to say that global, as this is a we are working with global error handling. It will again give us a complete blank file where we need to define error handling from our side. Now let's quickly define error handler. For we have, if you type error here in the quick search box, you will get error handler. We have the scopes that we are discussing, continue and propagate. Let's drag and drop error handler here. Now I'm going, if you wanted to change the name, I'm not going to change, because this is a very uh, we can say that the name that we wanted to say global error handler, that is correct. Under that, we need to find either on error continue, or we need to say on error propagate. So now we have two, and we need to define on which type, what is the type that we are discussing, either HTTP client or any or validation. So for now, we are just going to type any here. If you click on this lookup icon, you will also see what all available for your this particular project, what you are working on. And for continue, again, I'm going to say any here. Now we have defined anything, and we are not telling users to we are not telling the API what we are actually returning here. So for returning, let's quickly say that transform message, and in the transform message, we wanted to return JSON format. So let's say that JSON, and what we wanted to return is, let's say that we wanted to return a message here. So if there is any error in your flow, you will be getting error attributes available. So if you type error here, and if you say here .NET lesson, you will get a few fields as well, like what is the cause of that error, what are the child errors, if that is the parent, like any, what is the description, what is the detailed description, error message, and what is the type of. So let's say that we are going to say detailed description, and we are going to say that error type as well here. So that is okay, this is the cause of this. Data Science Explorers. Okay, let's try again here. We wanted to say the type of error, and it is going to say error, and then we have error type here. And under error type, we also have some attributes, like we wanted to get what is the namespace, what is the parent error type. We can also specify, but as of now, we are just going to enter the error only here. And now let's create one more variable here, and this variable we will say the status of our HTTP request that we saw we can override. So let's make it as HTTP status, and if there is on error continue, I'm going to return 200 status code. And if there is any on error propagate, we will be returning 400 status code. So go here, copy all this. There's the same, we wanted to return the same, and the only thing that we will return here is we will say scope, and we will say on error propagate, so that we can see which error handler scope is actually executing in our case. And again, let's quickly create a variable here. And the variable name will be same. We don't want it to make it as a different. And here it will not create a new variable for you. If you have this variable already in your flow, it is going to override the value. It is like something you have defined a variable on the top of your class, and now you are using that variable to make the changes. Now we have got this error handling. Before we go ahead, let's quickly get back to our flow. This is a flow we are talking about. On error continue is going to return by default 200 and the payload, and on error propagate is written by default 500 and error description. So where are those are things are defined? If you go to the responses, this is a response. If you see, this is the error response. That means this is a success response. This is error response. By default, it is returning error.description that we are talking about, and we have a status code. If you wanted to override, we can use a status code here. We have region phrase. Region phrase is the value that we are getting. Let me show you what was the region phrase. This is the region phrase. We are getting okay, we are getting some error. This is, we can also override that region phrase as well. Let's say that we wanted to override the status code for on error continue as well. You can use whereas, and we have, now we have, you can also use this because data sense explorer is not working for me. So even we can go to the variable, we copy this variable and responses, and we wanted to use status. By default, if there is no status set, we wanted to say that return 200 because this is status code. Region phrase, I'm going to say return success instead of okay or anything else. Same thing we can do for on error propagate. We are going to say by default return 500, and region phrase we are going to say error instead of anything else. Whatever the status code is, it is not going to took the region phrase from the status code. We are going to return the response. We are going to return from our overridden value what we have done. Now let's try to make a few changes here. I'm going to make the change. I will say from account where name equal to, that's it. What I'm trying is trying to again replicate the error and see what message we are getting there, because we have not made we have not made any changes into our request instead of the region phrase and the status code. Let's see if that happens and we are getting the expected output that we are getting. Our application is up. Let's try to, yep, we are on the correct request. Now we can see the region phrase is changed, the status code is 500, and we are getting invalid request data. If we see source view, we are not getting anything. We're not getting the value that we are sending from our global error handler. And we are not able to find out which global error handler is working, either on error propagate or on error continue. After that, like you have defined this, you have defined your global error handler. One thing that you need to do is go to global element section. We need to tell this application that we have a global error handler in place. Create here and say that type configuration. You will see global configuration. Under that you will get configuration. Click OK. It will tell you your global error handler and click OK. Now we have got global error handler on place, and we also need to do one thing, that is here, that we are going to test after that we have done with this testing. Let's see, let's wait our application. Okay, we are done. Now let's try to send it. Again we are getting the same, we are not getting anything else, right? Why we are getting the same? We are not getting, we are getting region phrase. If we talk about responses, we are getting region phrase as error, that means error has occurred. We're getting default status code as 500, and we are also sending, if we talk about flow, we are also sending status code code. Okay, we are sending 400. Now let's quickly go to our response. For the output that we wanted to send in case of response, I wanted to send whatever the output we are getting. That means I wanted to use data view and data view 2.0 is being used currently. I'm going to use application by JSON here because we are sending. Why we need to use these three hyphens? Because these are the header directives. Above that, we can work with our data view functions. That might be we can create variables, we can create define our own functions, and after that we need to return what we actually wanted to return. We wanted to return payload here. Now this payload we have got, try to done here, and we are done with this global configuration. We're getting on error continue. We have defined any condition. We have got on error propagate. So let's quickly work one by one. On error propagate we have. Let's save this application. We have got our application running. Click send. Okay, we are not getting anything here. We don't have anything. That means our error handler is not executing correctly. If you see that we have a message invalid request data, we should be getting this. In our transform message, we did it correct. We are using error. Okay, let's try to stop this. Sometime it happens. I need to stop my project and we'll see if that works after restarting the application again. Our application is deployed. Hopefully this should work for now. Yep, you can see it is working. So the only problem was it was not taking taking up the correct configuration. So if you go to the source view, you can see what are the messages we are sending, and we are sending a scope as a propagate, and you can see that we are getting 400 error. And now let's talk about this on error propagate, what it does. Inside our global configuration, we have on error propagate. What it will do is, what if there is any error, it will propagate to the parent, and it will always return error response, error configuration in your HTTP listener. So if you see that in case of responses, we have whatever the configuration we have done in error, whatever we are getting. In case of on error continue, what it does is it says that there is an error. Okay, there is an error, but it will not notify to the parent, and a success response will always be written. In the same case, let's try to remove this. We are going to remove, say that on error propagate. I'm not going to remove this. I'm going to change the condition for here for the type. I'll say it's not any. I'm going to say stream maximum size exceed. That will never met. And again, I will say here on error continue, and I'll put on the top of or on the below that. In case of on error continue, I'll say if there is any kind of error, use this on error continue. And then we have transform message. Under we copied this, and we will say that continue. And for the variables, again, we need to use I'm saying that let's make it 200. Now we have got this, we have saved this application. Let's see if this is our global configuration is being deployed. So this time our on error continue should execute. Why? Because in the type of our error, we said that this will only execute if the type is stream maximum size exceeded. If the type will be this, then on error propagate is going to execute it. If the type is on error continue, then on error continue and type is any, that means any kind of error is there, this on error continue is going to execute. Now let's get back to our advanced REST client, try to execute this. You can see that we are getting region treasure success, whatever we have defined, and the status goes 200. But the value that we will get, whatever we are sending from our error handler scope. So these are the two key things about on error continue and on error propagate that you need to keep in mind when you need to use continue and when you need to use propagate. That we'll also discuss. So let's now more talk about scenario 2. This is a calling flow. Now we are talking about global and error handling. Now let's talk about this second scenario. The calling flow that we have. In the same flow we did on error continue scope. What it will do, let's say that we are making a current request that we are doing. There is an error. It will say that on error continue. That's okay. But the response, whatever it is going to return is success response that we saw. Whatever the configuration is for success response in HTTP listener, that will be the output. And we already have seen this, so no need to replicate the scenario again. Now let's talk about scenario 3, where we have on error propagate. Again, the same thing, error will execute. Now this on error propagate scope is going to execute it, and it will tell the system that there is an error, and then error response is going to return. That means whatever the configuration we have done for error response, that will be returned to the system, to the end users in case of they are consuming our API. Now let's talk about the scenario 4, where we have two flow. One is a calling flow and one is a child flow. We can also say that the combination of parent and child. In the parent, we have on error continue scope. In the child, we have on error propagate scope. But before we discuss these scenarios, let's talk about error handling at the application level, because these error handling are defined at the application level instead of global level. Now, why we need application level? Because as we have this global level error handling, what is the need of application level? So we don't want to give the general message for each and every request that we are making through the API. We wanted to, let's say that we have different flows here. I have this flow, and if I wanted to use one more flow, I can drag and drop one more flow here. Now I wanted to define separate error mechanism for this flow and separate error mechanism for this flow. I cannot go with the global error handling. For that, let's work on the flow that we just created. Again, we need to say where it needs to listen. We can say that flow, that is our path. And for the name, even you can see that this is a listener. That is also not a good practice. I'm going to say that get, and whatever the path is, that is get flow. It will tell us that this is a listener which is listening on a flow, and that is a path for that. And if you wanted to define error handling, we did have like we do have error handling here. We just need to drag and drop scopes here. So let's talk about on error propagate. That scenario we are discussing about. And if you try to drag and drop anything else inside error handling, you will not be able to do. The only elements that you can drag and drop inside error handling is either on error propagate or on error continue. And even you will not be able to drag and drop error handler as well, because this is already treated as an error handler by Mulesoft itself. Now if you see here in the type, let's define any here. And again, for that we need to use transform message. In the transform message, we are going to say that JSON format, and we will only send the message here, and that will be error dot description. And we'll say that scope, we'll say the child flow, so that we can see which flow is actually returning the error. There is a comma missing. Now we have saved this, and we don't want it to but we have to create that variable because we are referencing that. So let's quickly create that variable as well here. And as it is propagate, we are going to use 400, and for continue we are going to use 200. Now we have this child flow ready. Or let's put some here. We can say that create a variable here, or set payload. We are going to use set payload. What this set payload is doing is trying to set a input for the next processor. Let's say that if instead of payload here, I'm saying that hello Mulesoft. If I'm saying this, no matter whatever the parameters or whatever the body I'm sending here to the HTTP listener, it is going to convert the Mulesoft hello, like it is going to convert the input for the next processor as a hello Mulesoft. So if I say that here transform message, and if I use transform message here, it is simply going to say that hello Mulesoft, and not going to send the data that I'm sending to the user. Now let's try to put some validation here. So we have a validation as well. I'm going to check either it is number or not. In the validation module, you have is number. You can just drag and drop there. If you want, you don't need no need to provide any configuration. Just leave as it is. For the value, I'm going to use that is a payload. So let's use a payload here. What is the number type? I wanted to check either it is integer or not. And for the message, let's quickly say that not a valid integer. So now if there is any error occurred due to this flow, this is going to return not a valid integer for us. So now let's quickly see this, and let's wait if our application is deployed, and then we will try to execute the key endpoint, that is flow. What error we are getting here? You can see that we have some errors. See below, it said that failed to deploy artifact. What are the project of our project is, and these are the errors. And the error is, if we scroll down to the right, we will say no definition parser found config. Validation is number. It is talking about this validation. For the value, let's quickly, instead of payload, we are just going to put inside single quote. We just wanted to throw the error, that's it. That is, let's now to save this, see if there is any error or we are able to successfully deploy that. So if you see that if there is any kind of error in your application, even your application is not telling with the help of a red sign, you will get the error that is here, and you will also see which particular element is giving you the error and preventing you from deploying the application. So we are getting the error in our configuration. Not sure why we are getting this configuration, but we can try to create a configuration that is not a deal for us, because I've tried it many times and there is no need of configuration, but we can try if that works. That is well and good for us. Nope, we are getting this error, so we are going to just remove this. This is just and how we can throw an error is, again, we can use Salesforce query here, and we can try to pass an invalid query to Salesforce. So we will say select ID name from accounts, or anything we can say. We just wanted to throw an error here. Let's save it and see if that is working for us. It is giving the error for the same, but we don't have any kind of validation now as of now in our flow. Let's quickly, let me stop it. I'll try to execute my application again. Sometime it happens and it doesn't took the latest configuration whatever you are doing is, and that also might be because of the configuration of your system, because the configuration that needed for your Mulesoft is 16 GB RAM, which is recommended. And that might be the case for me, because I don't have that enough RAM here in my system. This time it should work, because we're not getting any kind of errors. Okay, it is trying to initialize our application. Now we have deployed. Let's quickly try to execute flow here. You can see we are getting 500 error, server error, invalid request data. Because why we're getting this error? In the flow level, we have done the configuration. If we have a if we have a configuration error handler mechanism at a flow level, it is not going to execute, or it is not going to tell the global handler to handle my error, whatever the error we have. It is going to simply execute here, and whatever the error we have, it is going to return us. That is what we are getting here. Now on the same page, if we say that on error continue, what it will do is it will simply do whatever the error is coming, that is error, but it is going to return, or it is going to tell the user that there is no error. You don't have any kind of error, and we don't need any error here. So we can say I'm in child flow. And if you save this after deploying that, we can get that error. Now let's remove this just for testing purpose. Okay, before we remove this, let's test that what we made the change here. Okay, our application is done. Again, we are getting 500. That means it is not taking the current configuration. Okay, why we are getting? Now this is also the one thing that you need to notice. If you have two error handler with the same condition, it is going to take up the first one which is going to meet the condition. If you see that in our case, on error propagate also have the same condition, that is any. Whenever there is any error is going to occur, it is going to fill up in this condition and going to return the output to the user. It is not going to evaluate the next upcoming condition for us. That is why we are getting the output as a 500 server error. We are not getting this. And if you try to remove this on error propagate, or if you try to change the type, because we are going to, and if you see here, now we have got few more errors as well. Sorry, error type. Why we are getting this? Because in this flow, now we are using Salesforce. It is going to tell us the Salesforce errors as well, like Salesforce connectivity, invalid session, request data, or invalid session. So let's say that I'm going to say Salesforce connectivity, which is not going to be a problem for us, and so that we can get the correct output that we are looking for. Now our application is deployed. If you try to send it, you can see now we are getting 200, and whatever the data we are sending from the child error continue, that is child flow. So this is how your child flow application work. And now let's have a look here. This was our scenario that we were working. So let's quickly try to replicate this. I'm going to remove this error handler from the child flow, because I'm going to call this from our parent. And we have on error propagate. So let's quickly make this change. In case of on error continue, we are going to make the change as a Salesforce connectivity, and this is going to any, so that our on error propagate will is going to do the trick for us. And for now, I'm going to make this as a correct query so that we don't get any errors here in our parent flow. And before that, after this set variable, I'm going to call this flow. How to call a flow? You have an element called flow reference. Just drag and drop where you wanted to use it. I'm going to use before choice router, so that this word doesn't get execute and we fail into the correct situation that we try to test. Which flow you wanted to call? My flow is flow 1. And if you wanted to create a variable, you can use a variable here as well. And what is the target value? That is a payload here. So now if we save it, what was the scenario? Let's quickly have a look here. In the parent, it should be on error continue scope. So before we deploy, let's try to put on error continue in the parent as well. And here we are going to say, not going to put anything else. We're just going to put a payload here, and we will say inside parent flow. We just wanted to make sure from where the error is coming and which handler is working. So let's let the Salesforce, let the Mulesoft deploy this application. Now we have got it. Let's go to our testing tool. Okay, we don't have any flow here. We need to use demo object type as account. And you can see 400 is a status variable that we are sending from a child attribute. The success phrase is success, and inside parent flow. Why we are getting this 400 and we're not getting 200? Let me quickly walk you through. In our parent, in our child, we are using on error propagate. We are using a variable, and that is setting a value of 400. In our parent, we are not setting any kind of variable, and inside our listener, we have made a configuration that by default use the status. If there is nothing, then use 200. If you wanted to use 200, then we need to use a set variable here as well, and that is going to say HTTP status, and here we need to use 200. Then it will work for us. Now let's talk about the next scenario that we have is, so these all like error handler at flow level we already discussed, and we also discussed why we need flow level. We wanted to provide different mechanism to the different flows. We need error handling at flow level, and These are also the same scenarios that we just discussed. If we don't have anything, error is going to return. And now if we have two at the parent, one is on error propagate without match, on error continue without match, error response is going to return because we do have error handling mechanism, but there is nothing. Let me show you so that you don't get confused. And for this, what we are going to do is, let's quickly go to this flow. For the initial stage, I'm going to say that stopped. And for the same here, I'm also going to, why we are doing stop, because we wanted to create a new flow here so that we can work on a separate new use case here. Let's say that we are saying that parent flow. Now we have got parent flow. Quickly drag and drop listener here. Again here, name it as parent. As we wanted to get the error, we don't need to worry about anything else. We just need to get the query. This will throw error for us, and we need to provide error handler here. So let's say that on error continue, on error propagate. We have both, but they both are not, both don't have any matching condition. So let's talk about here. So we'll say don't have any matching condition. Let's use set payload to set the value. This is continue. And this is propagate. Now let's see if our application is still running. Yep, that is. I'm going to use parent because okay, service is unavailable. Again, try to use parent. Servers not initialized to handle this request, either not initialized yet or it has been disposed. Okay, so let's see. It is working currently. Nope. Let's try to stop it again. That is what we can do for now. Again, in the meantime, it is executing. We can have a look here. We are doing a query here, which is returning an error for us. Then we have on error handling, sorry, on error continue, on error propagate, both without matching any condition. We just need to see what error we are getting. And to make sure that we are on the correct path, let's quickly make the response for the error as a, instead of text by plain, I'm going to say, let me use data view here, %w 2.0. I'm using application by JSON. I'm here, we wanted to return payload so that we can get what payload we are returning. Let's see if, okay, it's deployed. We just need to save it again. And it should deploy. Okay, we are getting signal, no problem. Our application is deployed. You can see that we are getting 500 server error and we are getting nothing. Why we are not getting anything? Because we tried to handle inside our error handler mechanism, but those conditions are not mapping and not matching, and global error handling is not going to do anything because you have your error handler mechanism. You need to handle it. That's what global handler says. If you don't have, then I'm going to handle it. Now let's talk about the next situation that we have is, so we have how we can handle errors at the process level. Now this is something like try catch in Salesforce or in other programming languages like JavaScript or Python, Java, whatever we have. for a particular process if you wanted to define error handling and when this needed. So let me quickly give you a example for this. You are going to a travel site where let's say that MMT, you're trying to search some flights there for your booking, and what it does is whenever you whatever the keyword you are putting there, it is searching from the different database, and then it is returning a result to you. What if there is any error returned by some database that we are not able to see as an end user? That in that case they are handling error at a process level, and they are not letting the user know that there was any error written by some random database that you were looking for the keywords you are searching, and that database doesn't have. That is what here we need to handle the error at a process level. So how we can handle the error? Again, we have on error propagate and error continue. These are the two key things that will be remaining same across all three error handling level, and you no need to worry. If you talk about on error propagate, the transaction is going to roll back if there is any error. The complete transaction is going to roll back, and in case of on error continue, it is going to commit that transaction wherever the error is occurred till that, and a successful response, the same thing, success and error response is going to return in case of continue and propagate respectively. Now again, we do have some scenarios here. So if you see that we have a calling flow and we have a uh, this is a calling flow and this is a child flow which is inside try scope, and if there is any error, we have a try on error continue. Again, the concept will be same. If error propagate, it is going to tell the parent that there is an error. In the parent, if there is on error propagate, it is going to tell the user that there is an error. If there is on error continue, it is not going to tell the user that there was an error. It is going to simply return the success response. Let's quickly instead before going ahead, let's quickly do this and see how this actually look like. Now until in our previous examples, we are using choice routers to make the calls for a single request. Now we are trying to make a call parallelly with the help of scatter gather element that Mulesoft does provide. So let's quickly we are going to create a new flow here, and we will say that try catch. And before we use, let's quickly stop this because we don't want to stop at that time and then execute this. Let's use a listener here, and for this path I'm going to say SFDC, because now we wanted to perform the operation in a Salesforce environment. We wanted to get the records. We wanted to get the records from the Salesforce. How it is going to work? So scatter gather is a element which sends the requests parallelly and return the response to you. So if you wanted to make the calls, again we took the example. We wanted to get the flight details from a different data set, data source. You can use scatter gather, send the request parallelly, get the response, and return to the user in your interface whatever you want. So here what we are going to do, let's quickly say Salesforce query here again, and this time I wanted to make the query in 3 objects in a single go. Now we have 1, we have 2, and we have 3. We have 3 objects. We wanted to make the query in all 3 objects. So let's quickly say select ID, name, email from contact, and limit the record as 10. Sorry, 10. We don't want to get more records. And let's try to make it as a unique so that we can get which object we are querying. And here I'm saying that select ID, name from account. And here I'll say contact, and I will make it as select ID, name, email from contact. And next thing that we have is, instead of contact, we are going to make it in a lead here. So we just need to change the object name, that is lead. Now we have got all 3 So you might be thinking that all three are going to return different response. How we are going to how we are going to aggregate the response into a single output. So let's quickly drag and drop this transform message here. Outside the scatter gather, you will get the output here. Now I only want to say here I want to output in JSON format, as what we are doing is now let's try to output the payload. This is what we are trying to do as of now, and then we will try to replicate the error and we will see how this try catch is useful to work at a process level to handle the errors. Let's wait till our application is getting initialized. In the meantime, let me show you, like, whatever the drag and drop or whatever the UI we are able to see is, it is going to store all those configuration here in the XML form. If you see what it is going, that Salesforce query, what is the query, what was the name that we are doing, what is the unique ID for that, everything is in XML format. And the output, even you are going to see what output we are getting. And same thing is for all the flows. And you can also create those elements that we created the configuration. You can see all those configurations are available here. You have a listener configuration, we have Salesforce configuration, and this configuration will be available across all the flow inside that application. If you have another application, let's say that I have one more application that is called main, this configuration will not be available inside this project. But inside the same project for different flows, those configuration will be available that we also saw here, and we also witnessed that while we are using different flows. Now our application is deployed. Let's quickly try to make a request, and that is SFDC. Send it. And this time we must be able to see 200. What we are getting is, okay, I've got the response. Let's say that resource, source view. This is 0. That means we are getting some inbound. These are the attributes that we are talking about. This is a payload for account. And again, if you scroll down, we do not put a limit here. That is why we are getting too many accounts. And if you see, this is 1. That means this is the for, like, this is for contacts. And then at the end we have for lead as well. So if you see that here we are getting object, and inside object, sorry, we are getting object, yeah, inside object we have different arrays of payload. How we are going to combine this into a single output, and we no need to traverse like 0, 1, 2, because we don't know how many database we are hitting. For that we have in our transform message itself, we have like database provider method called provide functions called flatten. We need to use flatten payload, and what we are looking for, payload inside payload. Now it is going to combine all the requests into a single JSON form. Now before we go ahead, let's try to put here limit, because we don't want to get that much data. I'm going to say that limit 2, and here limit 2 as well. For the lead, let's make as 2 as well, so that we don't get too much data. Now let's try to say here we have got some error. I'm going to put some filter here. Okay, it was not taking. I'm going to say where name equal to, and again that is limit 2. I've got this. Again, let's verify that we have got that. Yep, we have. And here we have limit 2. And if we try to save it, let's see what will happen and what will be the output for our request now. If we try to make, this would be getting 200. And if you see, sorry, if you see source view, we are getting error as well. And while okay, in data table, you see we don't have anything. We're getting source view and we are getting error here. Why we are getting error? And if you see, there is a scope of continue. That means our global error handler is working and it is returning us the error. But it's what actually it should return us, or what we are accepting is like expecting is, if there is any error in any of these three databases, at least we should get the data of these two, rest of remaining to whatever we have is. For that, what we can do is we can define process level error handling. How to do that? Either you can find here like you can find try and you can drag and drop, or if you wanted to wrap up a particular process inside a try catch operation, you can use wrap in and you can use try. If you say try and we have catch here, and we wanted to use all three to wrap inside a try, and let's quickly wrap in inside try. Okay, and then in case of error handling, we don't want it to tell the parent that there was any error while we were processing the request. So here we are going to use on error continue, and inside on error continue, let's quickly use transform message, and inside transform message we will be returning a blank array here, so that we don't get any error. It will be a blank output for us. Now the same thing we need to do. Let's quickly define the type as well. And in case of here, we also need to do the same thing, because we don't have any error in this process, but we just wanted to make sure that we are following the practice whatever we are doing here. Now let's save this, and after our project is deployed, we should be able to see the correct output that we are looking for. Like that means we will be able to see output for lead and contact, and for account we will be not getting anything. So let me quickly see here. Okay, our project is deployed. Hopefully it will be taking the correct configuration, that means the latest one. Now if you see in the source view, now we have got a now we have got an array, and inside array we have contact and we have account lead as well. Like that means we are not getting account here. If there is any error, it is not telling us, that it is not telling the user that there was any error, and it is quickly sending us whatever the information we do have. So this is how you can work with the process level. And now let's talk about the last slide of the session. I know it was a very lengthy session. So here we have we have two types of error: system errors, and then we have messaging errors. And if there are some system errors, that means uh, those are thrown at a system level and we cannot do anything with these two errors. And but for messaging levels, we have all those mechanism that we just learned here in Mulesoft, like at the 3 level, at with the help of like whatever the requirement is ours, and based on what is suiting what is the best suit for us, we can use that one. And you can follow me. This is the last slide. And if you wanted to what is the upcoming session on Impact Salesforce Saturday, you can go through with this link, trailblazercommunitygroups.com, and we have Delhi in developer group. And you can also use we have some bit.ly URL. You can also use this one, and you can follow New Delhi, SFDC, Doug, and Facebook and Twitter as well. So now we are open for any questions. If we do have, please feel free to ask us, and if there are any in the chat, I'll try to read those.
Guys, any questions so far? All right, guess Amit, there are no questions. So again, guys, if you have any questions, anything related to this particular webinar or error handling in Mulesoft, I think Amit, this was a very, very detailed session. Thank you very much for that. And I think the video and the slides of this particular session would be really helpful for anyone who's working on Mulesoft. I can understand there are not a lot of people who are working on Mulesoft still, but I'm pretty sure in the coming days that number is going to grow pretty big and this technology will stand out on its own. So Amit, guys, so we are going to wind up now. Again, thank you Amit for this session, and we'll be soon sharing the slides as well as the recording of this.
Yes, Atul, there is one question from Zanjit who is asking that if only first condition is true, execute the first one account. Ranjit, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question because your question is not clear that much to me, that will be good and I can assist you in a best possible way and I tell you. If you're talking about choice router, it
Yes,
is,
yes, yes.
yeah,
I'm talking about Java. It means, for example, if you have a like a choice router, you drive one choice router, making 10 conditions. Okay, last one is by default condition, and first nine are different on the condition like as in Java if else, right?
yeah.
Okay, so if first condition is true, it will going only the first condition is true and remaining are not going beyond the limit and execute only based on the first condition is find the first true condition only, I think.
Yes, yes. So that's what we saw here, right? So if the account is
Yes.
like we are sending account, it is going to check the conditions. If there is any condition that is whatever the expression we have provided is true, it is going to send the information to the database or fetch the information from the respective database. If you
Okay.
wanted to,
Okay.
yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me. Tell me.
So if you wanted to use like if you wanted to make request parallelly, that we saw with the help of scatter gather, and we can handle the error at the process level. We can get the information from a different database, flatten those into a single payload, and then return to the user. And if you wanted to parse and send to the UI,
So yeah, flatten is like a function. So it's an array of array, right?
yeah, that is an array of object. We can say once we get
Okay. So
output
okay
from
means in one shot we can say na array of array if someone asks
no, if
if
someone asks what is the type of scatter gather, then you can say that array of objects.
okay array of object. Also, it split the parallel message to the means all messages are same or the different message.
All messages are coming from the different data source, and those are different payloads. We are combining
Okay.
into a single payload with the help of flatten message that data view provides, flatten function.
Okay. There is another option for the round robin. I saw in a studio.
Hmm.
So in a round robin, there is the same process. Then why are you going for the round robin? There is no option for the time slice.
Actually, I didn't get your question.
Means according to means whatever means I did a study in round robin algorithm or say there is a time slice, right?
Hmm.
Slice time. So in that case, when we use the round robin, then what output we'll get?
I have not used, to be honest, round robin in MuleSoft, but
Okay.
what I know about round robin is to make the request on a time interval basis for a particular, like let's say that we have 10 database, and if the first request is coming, we wanted to send to the first database, second is coming to the second database, and uh, and so on. We wanted to send the request like equal number of requests to the database that we do have. That is why let's say
Oh,
that we have order management system, and we have 10 different systems which are sharing a central system, right? In that case, we don't wanted to send the request to the single database, or we don't wanted to fill up the request to there, and other rest of systems are free, and they are remaining free, and no requests are being sent to those. So in that case, if you wanted to send the equal number of requests to the uh, different data sets, and that data sets is sharing the information from a central database, then we can use round robin, and we can also define what is the time interval for that, as per you said that there is a time slice.
Yes, yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah. Anything else?
Thank you. Thank you
Just,
very much.
just thanks.
I think we're great guys. Getting the of course will be first. All right, guys. You have a lovely Saturday and a lovely day. Thank you, Amit.
Thanks, Atul.